minutes delayed, but that's okay. I think we should still kind of be able to make up on the time part. As we have been saying since morning, request all of you to be kind of interactive, ask questions, make the best utilization of your time over here, and try to grill the brains of the esteemed panelists like they are here over. Of course, the question that's picked up as the best one by our moderator would also stand to get a prize from the Product Leaders Forum. I would like to have, or rather I would do a quick introduction of a moderator and then hand it over the dais to him. So he's a co-founder and president of Witty Parrot, a serial entrepreneur and a business alchemist based in the Silicon Valley. He has co-founded multiple technology and publishing companies in the US and India. Via Foresight Plus, he helps companies to bring new ideas to life or in bringing new life to current ideas. Wow. He has written and published 12 books so far, and he's an award-winning teacher at the Founders Institute and a mentor at the Thiel Foundation's 20 Under 20 program. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together for Rajesh Shetty.
Good afternoon, everyone. We can prove them wrong by saying good afternoon even louder. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon. See, I was thinking if you didn't speak loudly, so I was thinking of the best question award. I wanted to change that to a best person who will do the break dance or something like that. So it looks like I don't have to do it. So I want to welcome the panelists first. I want to welcome Sridhar from iEnabler, founder CEO of iEnabler. Next up is Ankit Rawal from InMobi, who heads sales for India for InMobi. And we have Sundar Ramakrishnan from Cisco. And Sameer from Cognizant. So I'm so glad all of you are here. And then we are running 2 minutes late, so we'll get started right away. So one of the things that when I started my first company in 2000, it was an open source company. And then people would come to me and they said, all the open source creators would come and say, I just launched this open source product, and in the first week, I got 122,000 downloads. And I thought, my God, there's an unicorn forming here. And then after 6 weeks, the whole project will be scrapped. And I was thinking, what is happening? And it used to happen again and again. Then I realized in the open source world, what happens is, anything that people release in open source, there will be about 200,000 of them. They'll download it just for fun. So, and then just to check out what is there. So then I started realizing that there is a difference between a fad and a trend. So the first question I have for the panelists is, they also have seen fads and trends. How do they distinguish between a fad and a trend? So maybe all of you can give your viewpoints. Sure.
Thanks, Rajesh. For me, a fad is a friend too. So, trend, yes, has some absolute data, but then, in technology, I feel fads are important too. So they will help us to kind of get to that trend. So for me, both are equally important.
Being a mobile guy, I'll say this, and I hope Naveen is not listening to, but in India, off late, we hear a lot about mobile first, mobile only. India is a mobile first country, which is true and not true in some sense, right? Like, this is a product leadership forum, and a lot of you product managers out here actually code for mobile first on a big screen, right? You write code on very big screen. So I think one of the trends or fads, I think it's more of a fad than really think of a trend that we call about mobile first. If that was the reason, why would a Flipkart not go to only mobile app and continue on desktop? So I think one of the things you have to keep thinking about this is, if you can put consumers first and what is important for them, then it becomes very clear what is a fad versus what is a trend. So for example, the example I said, mobile first or mobile only, you have to just step back and think from a user's use case. What are the times when he may use a desktop what is the time he may use a tablet, what is the time he may use a mobile device, and maybe tomorrow what is the time he'll use this for a watch, because these interfaces can be changing. So it is maybe not mobile, but it is the screens you have to keep in mind which is important. So whether it is mobile first or mobile app is more of a fad in the sense, but what a user wants to do on a screen is what I'll say a trend.
Okay. I'll give this a shot. It may not be as elaborate as what Ankit mentioned just now, but the way in which I see this is, what is the transformative effect that a particular technology can have? Most times you'll see that the transformative effect that something can have on people are the things which are going to have, it becomes truly a trend as against just a fad. Let me give some examples, and maybe some counter examples also, because it's not a science, right? Let us take wearables, since Ankit mentioned that. In my opinion, at this point in time, wearables is a fad. It's an optimization over whatever we have at this point in time, right? How many steps have you walked today, or what's your heart rate, or whatever else. It's an optimization over whatever we have. However, it can become a trend if, for example, at a later point in time, people like the insurers jump in and say that I need this information in order to be able to optimize your premium and dole out insurance policies in a certain way. So it requires some stars to be aligned in order that this technology can become a trend in the future. But at this point in time, I would say it's a fad. It's a fashion statement. But it's an optimization. It is not a transformative effect. I would quote one example of, as Sridhar and I were talking about SDN. 2008, people said, oh, well, yeah, SDN is going to come and Cisco is going to vanish, right? And 8 years later, we are still looking for SDN to make Cisco vanish, and we are finding that it's not happening. And I would say that here is a counterexample of what I believe truly has a transformative effect, but it is not going to be quite the game changer in the manner that we conceive it to be. It is going to be integrated into whatever we are doing, and over time, it'll have an effect. So these are the two things that we should be cognizant of when we distinguish between a fad and a trend, in my opinion.
I'm glad you used the word cognizant. And some way we have a knack of marketing ourselves, if not through our own mouth, but through someone else. It helps. But I think I can give a different spin to all this, because I'm the only person in this panel which is from a services consulting kind of a background with the existing organization. I think, honestly, a fad and a trend, it's a very thin line and a very blurred line. What eventually lies in terms of a fad becomes a trend in no time, because we're talking about technology cycles getting very compressed. What it used to be 5 years became 3 years, now 18 months. And you heard some relative examples from the panel members, and one of the largest fad which actually became a trend is something what we'll say is the whole SMAC trend, which started 4 or 5 years back with social, mobile, analytics, cloud. And now we're talking extensions of IoT, cybersecurity, is now all, I would say, bucketed under digital. Now, is digital a trend? Definitely. But if you pick up the whole analyst or I would say the topical guys who are talking about the fad and trends, I think there is a thin line in terms of what we say that today. The dimensions of each one of these technology extensions or disruptions are very, very, I would say, high. We talk about cybersecurity, we talk about kind of IoT, even analytics. The dimensions are so high that eventually when someone starts monetizing the fad, it almost becomes a trend from an elongation perspective. So that's where I think we'll have to keep in mind that eventually it's all about monetization. It's all about, in the minds of the consumer, how they seep those fads. And it's actually for the product architects, owners, and even the service providers of the consulting organization to see how they can actually move those fads to trends on a faster scale.
Very good. We'll do some microphone optimization. Samir, hold on to the microphone. So let's get to the meat of the session. And if you want to pick one or two trends that everybody should watch out for, if you can share what you see as the two big trends in the next 1 or 2 years. And how can somebody capitalize on it? What can they do? Can they create products? Can they tag along with them? What can they do?
I think that's a very relevant question, Rajesh, what you asked. I think for my own perspective, as I see it, digital is a huge trend. It's called I would say, digital detonation, where we're talking about a huge play in terms of compressing all the SMAC, IoT, cyber components put together. And eventually, there are three dimensions why I call digital a huge disruption. One, it's called, it has a game-changing ability to move the brick and mortar businesses to the digital. Second, it's also got linked to the accentuation of the whole customer experience, because eventually customers are moving to different scale in terms of how they feel and they kind of look at the products. And the third piece is how it's also changing the whole operating models of the businesses. Now, when you look from a product aspect, there's a huge opportunity for different startups, organizations to latch onto digital and say, we can influence or change any of these three dimensions, or the three dimensions put together in terms of what can happen. But if we look at this, the whole opportunity, we're talking about almost, and I'll just give one simple fact. If you talk about the spending in technology, it's a huge $1.5 to $1.8 trillion opportunity. Now, the trends don't move in terms of unless the money is getting spent. And this technology spend is only getting increased by 2 to 3%. So the discretionary spends which will happen out of this digital SMAC components will be from this 1.5 to 1.8 trillion. That's where I think the new product companies or the new organizations or the new startups which are looking, if they are focusing on this side of the picture, I think there's a huge opportunity in terms of monetization.
Sundar, what do you think?
Yeah, so if I may, I'm a technologist at heart, so let me take a technology view of things and look at a slightly longer horizon, because for a technology to mature and then become a product which sells, so I'll take a longer time horizon. And if you'll allow me, I'll name three, which I think are most exciting as far as I see it. I believe there is immense potential for this new technology called blockchain. I don't know how many of you are watching this, but blockchain is going to have an immense impact as a trustless transaction processing system becomes more and more prevalent.
Sundar, can you, for people who may not be familiar with it, can you explain what is this blockchain?
Okay, so blockchain, at the heart of it is, all of you may have heard of Bitcoin. And Bitcoin itself is not a great success for a variety of reasons, including the fact that here is a system that was used instead of cash to buy drugs. But that apart, the underlying technology is called blockchain. Blockchain, think of it like what they call it is a trustless system, but it's still secure and trusted. What it means is, let us say I can have financial transactions between two people without a MasterCard or a Visa coming in between. Okay, so it is trust formed by consensus, it is distributed, and it is called a distributed ledger. And the reason why I'm excited about blockchain is the fact that it goes beyond, even though what is called fintech, as in financial technology, is the prime mover, the uses for blockchain transcends finance. It goes into all aspects of any transaction. So just imagine Bangalore, where we are stuck with so much corruption as a consequence of, let us say, real estate, where every real estate transaction is recorded in a blockchain, right? So it can make a huge difference to the manner in which society is evolved in the future. I'm sorry for the long-winded answer, but blockchain is one thing which I believe has got immense potential. The other two are perhaps more in the face and things that are things which are folks would have heard about more frequently. Autonomous robots, I think the time has come here for us to think of them as reality. Thus far, it is in the realm of science fiction. You think of R2-D2 and assume that that's never going to happen. I think the time has come for it to happen. And the third thing I believe has got immense potential is virtual reality. We actually already are in the realm of augmented reality in a sense, right? Google Glass is a prime example. Even in fact, the things that we're carrying in our pockets, the smartphones that we're carrying in our pocket, are in a sense augmented reality. But very soon we will have an ability to have immersive experiences as a consequence of virtual reality. And so I believe that these three have a huge transformational effect in society in general. And of course, there'll be a lot of subsidiary technology building blocks that go into it. We keep talking about IoT, and I think IoT is a building block. We talk about Li-Fi as against Wi-Fi, because RF is going to hit its limit in terms of data transport, so we may have to get into light-based data transport systems. We may have wireless energy transfer, energy harvesting as other ways by which these things can be enabled. But I believe that at a high level, these are the 5 technologies I'm going to be betting on in the next 5 to 6 year horizon.
Great, thank you.
Like Sundar is a technologist, I am more of a mobile wala, so maybe my bias is towards mobile. So one of the trend I think is that mobile will continue to be the son of the IoT solar system. So what I mean to say is that there will be, as Sundar was saying, there will be maybe connected watches, Fitbits, health, connected homes, electric cars, whatever IoT will impact, this device will continue to be the center of how you're really going ahead and control it. So mobile will continue to be the son of the solar system of these IoT devices. So which means if you are someone who's part of this value chain, either from the software side or from the hardware side, at least you are not going out of business in the next 10, 15, 20, 30 years. And corollary to this, what the other interesting trend from a mobile or from a packaged software I am seeing is that again, the shift is happening from client side to the server side. Let me explain what I'm saying. So if you think of the 1980s, right, Microsoft packaged software was the trend which was happening. And over a period of time, distribution, adoption, multiple versions became a problem. And then came internet and the browser, and everything started happening on the browser side. So a lot of the complexities were actually encapsulated on the server side. And then it became very easy. The simple browser became the interface for anything. And that's when a Google or a Facebook to some extent was born. Then again, Apple inverted this funnel, and then we had the whole app store. So whether it was iOS or then Google catching up through Android. And again there was a distribution of client packages and apps. App became very, very fascinating. But I think 2016 onwards, some of the trend I'm seeing is that again, this power is going back on the server side. So what companies like Facebook through M on the Messenger, or for example, what even a company like HelpChat, in India is trying to do is they're trying to move to bots and machine learning. And I think that will become an interesting trend where the next set of commerce, services, everything will start happening on the messenger or chat, and again application, where the power of the software will move on the server side rather than the client side. So 2016 onwards, the power will be of bots. So I think the first trend, mobile is the center of sun of all IoT solar system, and second is again machine learning IoT and movement from client side to the server side.
Very good. Sridhar, before you answer, after Sridhar gives his comments, we'll open up for questions. So please be ready with your questions, and please be as clear as possible so that we don't solve a puzzle to understand the question before we answer it.
Right. In fact, Rajesh, they've made my job easier. Okay. So let me look at it from an application perspective. Where would an augmented reality, a virtual reality, bots be really useful? I'm looking at two areas. One is healthcare, the other one is energy. So even talking something about an IoT, the kind of impact it can have from a provider to a service provider, to an hospital, to a pharma, to a bio company, is going to be immense. And in order to do all of this, you need to have that computing power. We are talking about robotics. So all that is going to be very, very important going forward. I see something similar happening in the energy space as well. So a lot of these technologies, in fact, I wanted to tell you this, if I have an extra minute. So most of the things that we are discussing here is all about a level 3 innovation. So a level 3 innovation brings in diversity. So you get something from bio, you get something from electronics, you get something from, let's say, pure software. So these technologies have an impact. It can have impact of cutting across. So that's something that we are going to see. I agree with most of the trends that they shared, but then I think these are two areas that we should watch out for.
Can you tell, you said that level 3
Right.
innovation.
Right.
Is level 1 and level 2?
Okay. Well, this was actually put together by inventor called Altshuler. Anybody knows about Altshuler? He's a TRIZ expert. Have you heard about TRIZ? No. Okay. So it's called the theory of inventive problem solving. So a Russian scientist, this was in his, I would say 1950s. In fact, if you go back to Edison, Edison said 99% perspiration, 1% inspiration. That's what he said. Whereas Altshuler said, you can't waste your time. You can't do experimenting every time. So Altshuler had a chance to study around 30,000 patents, and he found out some patents. So with all this, he described the levels of innovation. Level 1 and 2 is very fundamental. It's more applied. So I know that, 1 plus 2, I combine, I get something. Whereas level 3 is something that you are actually leaping out from your own domain and taking it from something else. Level 4 builds on it. Level 5 is something very fundamental. When I say fundamental, it could be a very physics-oriented or a bio-oriented kind of a thing. So, in fact, your S curve starts that way. So, starts from level 5, creeps into 4, 3. That's what we are seeing with many of these things that we are discussing here.
Very good. Thanks, Sridhar. So we'll take 2 to 3 questions. Who has a question? Yeah, the first person, the lady who is, yeah. State your name and then ask your question. If you want to target a particular panelist, make them uncomfortable, you can do that.
It was one of the phones that was being used all the time. So what are we doing what are you doing in your companies to always, to reinvent, reskill, so that we don't, you don't end up being a BlackBerry?
Sure. Thank you, Catherine. So the question is, we don't want to end up in the like BlackBerry. What are you doing in your companies or in your client companies, so that
Sure.
we don't face that.
Sure. Shall I take that? Right. So, for example, how do we do it? Let's take this cell phone here. I would say cell phone is a system. So, this system has 2 parts. One is a super system and a subsystem. Subsystem is a black box, so all the batteries, the semiconductor, the chip, everything is that. The super system is, it requires a internet connection, it requires a tower, it requires signal, right? So any systems that you really develop, you will have to kind of put it into a system, super system and a subsystem kind of a box. Now put 9 boxes around that. You will see as to, well, what has happened in the past, what is happening now, the current, and what is the future. So you will have to do this systematically at system level, that is your own product, at the super system level, at the subsystem level. 1, I would do this as a technologist. 2, we also want our sales force to do this. Now, what is the 9 box for Salesforce? So for them, it is job to be done, right? So for you and me, we have to come here. We have to just find this location. Today it is Google Maps. Tomorrow it could be something else. So they have to constantly monitor and see, well, is there a new job to be done that has come up? And somewhere we need to integrate this. The marketing view plus the technologist view has to be integrated. I think that is where probably BlackBerry missed the growth curve.
The technique that you mentioned, is there a
Right.
name for it?
Right, so we call this as landscape technique, 9 windows technique. Probably if you just go to one of our website, they can find this. ienabler.co is the website. So there you find some write-up on this.
Yeah. What do you think, Ankit?
So being a disruptor is a little difficult, but having said that, we really look at this in a 70-20-10 model. 70% of our effort, energy, resources really go into our current business. How do you really scale, continue, be ahead of the competition? 20% is where we really look at adjacent businesses. Like for example, when InMobi started, our competition was not so much Google, Facebook, but there were smaller such players. I'm talking about 2009, 2010. But then eventually we figured out, as we also grow big, some of these companies, like for example, Facebook was not a advertising ad dollar competition in 2010, which now has become. So as a company, you have to figure out which are those adjacent markets or adjacent companies which will affect, and we typically spend 20% of our time, energy there, and 10% what we call them moonshots. These moonshots are some things which will change your business, not by a multiple of 5%, 50% or even 2x, but 10x. So you always try to take these bets which are, the impact would be really 10x of what you are today. So that's how we divide our time, 70, 20, 10. And then hopefully, again, these are bets, you never know, everything will factor or it will really evolve. So you really focus on today and tomorrow, which is 70 plus 20, but 10% of the time for 10x kind of a growth.
Yeah, I don't want to spend too much time, but I think what Sridhar and Ankit have said captures most of the things. I would say within Cisco, we have exactly this model. And one of the things that, to answer your specific point about something like BlackBerry or even more stark, have you heard of Polaroid? Right? They were the only company that is doing instant photography till as long as it is analog. Right? And why do you think that's so? They were caught up in their own success. They patented the hell out of it so that there is no competition that ever could embark into that market for a period of something like 60 years. And being caught up in your own success is the biggest source of failure. Beat Kodak, beat Polaroid, which is very stark, Nokia, BlackBerry, and so on and so forth. And having a healthy competition within to question your ideas is a very, very necessary skill to have within large organizations.
I think it's captured.
Yes, very good. This person on the side, you.
Yeah, all of you have talked
Sir,
about.
first, state your name.
I am Ravindra. All of you have stated the external disruptions, but in our day-to-day life, when some of the engineers come up with the good ideas, most of the time we are so aligned that we don't allow anybody to come with something different. So how do you propose to solve that thing?
The question is it about how do we fight the not invented here syndrome? Or?
No, see, a lot of times our team members themselves come up with the disruptive things,
Yes.
but because we are so aligned, we'll say no.
Right.
So what are the best practices you are doing in your companies to counter that?
Who wants to take it?
I can take it because large organizations are the ones who suffer most from that, and I suffer from that on a day in and day out. And I think we have, again, very successful models. Google, long back, came up with a 20% one day work on your own stuff, no questions asked type thing, which is kind of a industry leader in that kind of thinking. And to your point, I think this is a struggle that within large organizations like the one I'm leading, this is a constant battle in a sense, and the ability to fund new innovations and so on and so forth is a constant problem. So among the things that we have institutionalized now are things like something like a Shark Tank. We do these hackathon events or whatever else, and then there's a Shark Tank type event, and I stow away a part of my budget to be able to fund these programs. And that is, I don't want to say that this is something I invented. There are things that we have done very successfully in doing these things and transforming ideas into products. And we have a lot of these DevOps type work that also happens, where I was talking to Vishal a little while ago. That is becoming a big trendsetter in our ability to integrate with a customer's point of view and then have the feedback loop closed. So these are a few things which are working really well in large organizations. Small organizations, they are happy. I wish they were there.
Anybody else want to add?
I can take this thing just in extension to what Sundar said. In Cognizant, we have something called Emerging Business Accelerator. This is usually kind of a, let's say, unit where any employee within Cognizant who's got a idea gets more vetted by a venture board. I mean, if it's a uni-dimension idea by one particular guy or an idea which can be, I would say, clubbed with 3 or 4 people. So they all come together, there is a venture board, the presentation gets done in a templatized business plan kind of a format. And eventually that guy is given sweat equity kind of, let's say, or a go-ahead, post the concurrence by the venture board to get and evolve that venture. The whole marketing engine of Cognizant, the whole account managers, client partners of Cognizant, then piggy bank on that particular concept idea once it gets fruitified in terms of taking it to the market. And eventually it's a practice which is gaining ground with many other organizations, the large ones specifically, because that's the only way the large organization can actually turn around the tide in terms of being innovative. So there are those kind of, let's say, processes through which, to your question, those individual contributors which have a very different set of ideas or brainstorming disruptive kind of, let's say, concepts, they can come forward and kind of give it as part of taking those ventures. And eventually the ventures are then taken to a critical mass and then kind of rewarded and kind of, I would say, acknowledged equally.
Very good. Next question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, hi, this is Manish here. So one of the key fundamental problems that large organizations face is the concept of this, what we call as the innovator's dilemma. Now, your multi-billion-dollar organization is based on certain cost structures, certain organization which is fine-tuned over years of investment and the strategic investments and infrastructures that you have built around that. Now, there is a company which comes in, which disrupts it with a completely different model. And for a large company to move on to something like that means disrupting their current cost models and probably compromising on their margins, which their investors will not let them do till the point they get a premium exit and they say, okay, now you go ahead and experiment. So how do you solve that problem? A lot of large companies are facing that problem today. A lot of large companies have perished because of trying to struggle the innovator's dilemma. So how do you address that?
It's a good question. I think one of the ways is to buy those smaller companies. Right, it's like outsourced R&D.
Yeah, that's true also. But I think it's a very relevant question. I think, look, there is a secret sauce through which most of the organizations, eventually, if they want to come out of this whole conundrum of not being relevant, which is simple, that at the end of the day, there is a method to madness in terms of adopting something what we say topical. I mean, an example what was questioned that, look, the Nokia, I think it was all coming with the warning signals that, look, Nokia is not going to be the mobile kind of a, let's say, instrument company. But I think that's where the large companies have also taken those ringing alarm bells as very, very in a much more agile, supple manner, where I think each one of them have a kind of a, let's say, mode of how they need to be more relevant, more contemporary, more topical into today's environment. A case in point, you take Cognizant. I think we took this conscious call of forming this emerging business accelerator or focusing on SMAC, IoT as separate business units all together, came way back in 2012. The fact was simple. Look, at the end of the day, you're making money on one stream, you're not making money, or you're going to make money in next 4-5 years. But in that mode, are you very robust and resilient in terms of the plan what you have? Because eventually, if it's a startup or a kind of a mid-size kind of a product company or even a kind of a, let's say, large enterprise, we often miss the element of what we say monetization. Look, an idea or a concept, if it's not monetized, has no relevance. And that's where the market size per se today has no meaning, because honestly, analysts are putting market size, with all due regards, to scale up that particular, I would say, segment. But eventually, no one knows what exactly the spin will be. In that mode, I think the smaller, supple companies have a huge advantage where they look at one component, and Sundar really mentioned that we're talking about fintech. I mean, blockchain, one particular transaction on the digital blockchain for a big bank can save $1.7 trillion from a lender's side. So imagine one startup coming, addressing one part of blockchain. Look at the monetization or look at the valuation that startup can do. I think that's where the larger companies and the smaller companies have to work in a manner where they pick up those components, make it large in terms of a critical mass, and monetize at each and every regular interval.
Just to add to that point, I think the time has come for large organizations, to answer Manish's point, to treat innovation as a business process. Like, it has to have the same kind of attention, the way you do it for marketing and sales or your engineering. It should not be a one-off kind of a thing. If it's one-off, yes, you are in the dilemma. Ensure that you have innovation as part of your business process and have a structured approach to deal with it. Right? It's not like one day you wake up and say, oh, somebody has bet me over. So you have to now start treating this with all seriousness it deserves. And I'm sure all the big companies are doing that now.
Just to add one more point to what you were saying, Samir, is that the cultural change is very, very important. you have to start realizing that not all the innovations will happen within the four bounds of your company, and you need to be open about it and accept it and quickly learn. Take the example of Facebook, right? If you think of what Facebook did, they only cracked the whole Facebook newsfeed, but they very quickly realized that Instagram is not their product, WhatsApp is not their product, but very quickly they figured out that if they can marry it within themselves, as a whole, it will be much bigger than an individual entity. And I think these products are doing even better now because they are part of the whole constellation of what Facebook has put. So understanding that you be successful one doesn't mean you'll be doing it every time. Have that humility to accept it quickly and then unlearn it, relearn it is, I think, that cultural mindset which companies have to adapt if you have to save this kind of disruption.
Very good. We'll take a pause from the audience questions. I want a sort of a rapid fire round. All of you can think about a question that you wish the audience asked and answer it for yourself. Your favorite question, right, so to speak.
Sure. So, continuing with the 9 windows.
Sridhar, first tell what questions you wish the audience.
So, well, the one that I kind of proposed, the 9 windows, not all that easy, right? So, how do we do it? Is there a secret sauce to it?
No, how do we do what?
So, I mean, forecasting the trend. How do I see the trend, So, one is putting these 9 boxes, and then what do I really do next, right? Something that you all have to do is, I spoke about system, super system, and subsystem. You have to constantly see as to what are the useful functions that are happening from system to the subsystem, system to the super system. At the same time, watch out on what are the harmful factors from the system to super system and to the subsystem, and what are the cost items. So what are we talking about? I'm talking about a product ideality where I have a summation of all useful functions divided by summation of all harmful functions plus cost. And ideally, I want my denominator to be 0. May not be possible, but then that's the route that we have to take. That's where the leadership should come in. That's where we'll have to say, well, what am I doing 5 years down the line? Do I have that ideality map? So the moment you make this, you chart this, then rest will follow. You know what are the fads, what are the trends that you need to track.
So basically what you are saying is people should stop using Facebook and WhatsApp and do some work.
Absolutely.
You'll put me out of business. So I think the question is like in a company, and maybe I'll just add on what I was talking about, culture, that how can you build that culture within your organization so that you fail fast, you fail cheaply, as you were mentioning, and maybe you can cohabitate the next big trend so that instead of getting disrupted, you are part of that disruption. And I think that, and maybe I can talk about what we have done at InMobi, have emphasized a lot from the very beginning, and we had that privilege to set up our own culture from the very beginning, and I've been with them for the last 7 years from the early days. We really emphasized a lot on the culture of what we are trying to build. And when we talk about culture, we really look at it like a pyramid. At the bottom of the pyramid, it is your values. So as an organization, as a subculture within your organization, you need to figure out what are your core values you stand for, and then you really abide by it. Now that impacts the person who's getting in your team or your organization, that abides how you take decisions. So your values are very, very important. Then on top of it is your mythologies. Like in a culture, you have stories. You identify what is your folklore, what is your stories, so that you can communicate your values in a more tangible way for me as a person in the organization. And on top of it is what are those kinds of rituals you have within your culture to celebrate some of these decisions you make. And it could be not just successes, but even failures. So for example, in the sales organization at InMobi, when we are doing, and we try to do it even till today, if there's a big account which somebody wins, there's a big bell in the floor which someone goes ahead and rings, and it creates a lot of joyous moment. There are other friendly people who want to say next time I should go and ring that bell. So we've created these rituals. Another one, we did something called Yavio X some time back, where we just zoomed out from our day-to-day problems and took a very different problem in an outside world Like, for example, we worked with the people, the team Indus, which is trying to put the first satellite mission on the moon from India, and we were trying to solve their problem. So identify those rituals within your team or your organization which you can do to make the whole journey much more interesting. So really emphasize on culture and identify what are your values, your mythologies, and on top of it, what are your rituals to reinforce your culture and your values in the organization.
The question which I'm hoping that the audience had asked was, where do you get your ideas from? A lot of what we've been discussing is about, once you get the idea, how do we convert it into a product idea, right? But where do you get the ideas itself from? How do you spot trends? And we have a slew of, I'm assuming most of you are tech guys, so they have a slew of sources, like you have IDC, Forrester, Gartner, you name it, right? So they all provide technology trends of various, the Gartner Hype Cycle, for example, provides a ton of information. But I would go beyond these. When you have to convert them into product, it's not just about technologies any longer. And I believe getting into forums which have information coming in from people with diverse ideas, naturally enough, is going to be important. And you look at sources like TED, look at things that are happening at the World Economic Forum that happened last month, and so on and so forth. It is very difficult to translate it readily, but if you watch these a little bit closely and hear these leaders talk about the biggest problems they are facing. When somebody talks about how they are solving a malaria in Africa in a TED talk, that gives us a potential health technology idea. When you talk about, let's go back to blockchain, talk about how to stop corruption, and you look at blockchain and say how that can be implemented, right? So it is when your technology idea meets a problem space that becomes an important source of information. The other thing to watch out for is what defense and space organizations world over open source. And defense and space are the technology leaders, have always been the technology leaders, defense especially, right from the birth of mankind, right? From the time somebody made a bow and arrow or whatever, defense has always been the forerunner of how technology has been driven. Now, if I look at those and say, what are the things that are being open source, that becomes an important source of information about how to build products along it. Going back to, I don't know, Velcro from Apollo days, or more recently GPS from the Operation Desert Storm, to more recently things like what India's own DRDO is doing with respect to food technology, with respect to light materials, and so on and so forth. So look at all these, they give you an idea about how to build technologies and how to leverage technologies for building products.
I'll keep it short, Rajesh. I think the question I think which is relevant, if I listen and really kind of ponder upon, is how do you simplify these fads and trends? Because honestly, all of us have a habit of over-engineering and I would say, complexifying the whole pieces. You talk about all these new technologies and trends. Look at the jargons and acronyms and all. It's so convoluted, where the mass adoption becomes a challenge. And I think that becomes a question that at the end of the day, trends and fads will come and go. But how do you ensure the simplicity, the minimalism for the mass adoption, where we're not talking about the downloads, we are talking about how the average kind of let's say consumer feels about in the whole subset of 7 billion population, whether I can use it or not. A case in point, success or failure, 251 rupees mobile. I'm sure a 6 lakh per second hit rate is exceptional. That guy may be a failure, but the kind of optics they have generated is tremendous kind of a thing.
Very, very good. So I think I wanted to ask one more question. Give me 1 second. So because we'll run out of time, if all of you can share 1 or 2 resources for people, if there is a book that they should read or a person they should follow, a blog or anything that can continue the conversation.
Okay. I would say get onto Twitter. There is a whole lot of thought leaders on Twitter, and that's a good source of information. Follow for technology trends, the names I mentioned, Gartner, Forrester, IDC, etc. Follow them. You just have to understand both Clay Christensen's innovator's dilemma that was mentioned some time ago, as well as the TRIS principle that Sridhar mentioned a little while ago. These two things have to, they'll give you the how of making things happen. So I think if I may categorize it, get your ideas, find what technology building blocks are required to convert that idea into a product, and then determine how to make the product itself. These three things are cornerstones, and sources such as what I mentioned just now will be the way in which you build the ability to get that information.
Again, if you're interested in mobility, what's going to happen? There's a person called Benedict Evans. He's one of the VC guys at Andreessen Horowitz, and he really blogs a lot of interesting stuffs about mobile. He also tweets a lot. And if you're looking for sites, one which I really follow is called The Information. There was a Wall Street Journal lady, she went out I think last year and started this blog, and it's quite insightful, quite deep from what you really read on a TechCrunch or similar sites, but they have a much more in-depth analysis. So Benedict Evans as a person to follow on Twitter, and The Information, the website.
Right. So added to Sundar's point, I would point you to TRIS Journal. So TRIS-Journal. So that's where you find a lot of blog articles. TRIZ-journal. So that's one place where you get pretty good insight. I'm sure most of us have read this book, Crossing the Chasm. Yeah, that's an amazing book. And also a paper, Harvard paper on Job to be Done by Clayton Christensen. That's a very good paper. Yeah.
Samir, do you have any resource or anything?
I'll make it lighter. Go back to Facebook and LinkedIn. Everything is available over there.
Very good. Okay. So I have a resource. My friend Neer Ayal wrote a book called Hooked, Hooked. It's how to design habit-forming products. You will also know why Facebook is so addictive once you read it. And that may not stop your addiction, but at least you will know why you are addicted. So we have some more time for questions. Remember that there is a prize for the best question. If I remember it right, it was coffee with Deepika Padukone or something. Don't quote me on it. No, I can't win that. That's why you asked the question. Sir,
sir, I have a question.
I keep seeing this title called the futurist. A lot of guys use that, and somewhere told me that futurist is somebody maybe who can spot a trend. Can anybody shed light on what is a futurist and how do you become one?
who wants to take this?
I have no idea, so I can't.
So I'll attempt.
Yes.
So very difficult, like you said, because if you want to be a futurist, you'll have to have two important things. On one side, you'll have to have creative freedom, and on the other side, you also need to know how to execute it. So how do you really balance this? So it's all about balance between creative freedom and execution discipline. So you should know the art of thinking deep, living it out, and then focusing on something else. I call it as flow methodology. Focus, leap, orient, what's next. So it's my mentor, Dr. Shankar, and we've developed it. So probably that would kind of, put you into that space.
Where can they learn about flow?
You have some write-up on our website, ienabler.co. So that's one place where you can visit. Yeah.
I have
ienabler.
ienabler.co. I think we are run out of time. Right. So Mandar, go
one
ahead.
last question.
One last question. So
Sorry. Okay. My name is Amar. This whole concept of disruptive innovation or disruptive technology is now being looked at in a different frame. I was reading on HBR recently where they said that few years back, Uber was supposed to be a disruptive technology in transportation. But then they quote you an example of a cab driver in JFK who kind of gives you a totally different experience. Like you get into the cab, a super clean cab with journals for you to read, a soothing music, to a soda option, trying to have an intellectual talk with you to keep you accompanied. So the point we are trying to make is, where does the customer value come into this disruptive technology? Sometimes we, in the name of doing disruptive technology or innovation, are we trying to force something on the customer, or are we trying to kill the customer value? How do you balance between customer value versus disruptive technology?
Great question.
I think, Amar, it's a great question, but I think the answer lies in what you asked. I think eventually this is all about accentuating the customer experience. You talked about Uber, you take Netflix, you take Airbnb, you take about Pandora. Every such organization have based their strategic, I would say, imperatives of enhancing the customer experience. Whether it's on the mobile, on the cloud, on the digital side, eventually I think that's the fulcrum on which your strategies and your, I would say, execution will lie. So if that's something which is kept in mind, I'm sure the monetization by a startup or a large company can easily be done. But what needs to be injected as a part of customer experience is the nuance piece. The nuances, if not captured well, will always give a kind of a problem where they are not able to conceptualize what the companies are trying to do versus what needs to be seen. And that's where the whole holy grail comes in, that why products usually fail, because nuances is not something you capture something, because ultimately it's understanding what we say the customer psyches actually. So that's imperative actually.
I'll just add one point, and this happens a lot with Indian companies and even globally. I've seen that, and we were discussing this, that instead of doing 10 things X time better, do one thing which is 10X better. And if you can replicate it at scale is when disruption will happen. So, like for example, Indian companies or startups are very much like banyan trees. They're trying to do 10 different things, 10 different routes, and then that's why they're not able to scale. Versus if you think a lot of companies from the West which really disrupt, the names you mentioned like Uber, Airbnb, do one thing right, but it is like a red wood tree which is very focused, very sharp, and it is 10x better, which makes all the difference. So I think if one can do that, that's where you can really create disruption.
Mile deep, inch wide.
Sorry?
Mile deep, inch wide.
Exactly. Focus, focus, focus.
Sundar, do you want to add anything?
Nothing much. I'll just say that Darwin will eventually come and get those guys who are, right? So I think we have proven that time and time again. So I think it's okay.
I think, first of all, I want to thank all the panelists. You all were awesome. So, and I want to thank the audience. You all were awesome. So it was thank you so much. And then I have to pick Amar's question as the best question. I don't know about the prize, Amar. You work it out with Mandar there.
It is not Deepika. So.
It is very close to Coffee with Deepika.
Thanks a lot. I think this was really, really wonderful. True to the name, disruptive technologies, staying on top of disruptive technology, the trends on it. I'm pretty sure none of us even had a little blink. but truly lots of things to be learned over here. Very, very engaging. I haven't seen such an engaging session since morning. So truly, truly grateful for all of you taking time out from your busy schedules and coming here. Rajesh, I would request to hand over tokens as a part of appreciation to the esteemed panelist.
Even the panelists won't get Deepika. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks. Samir, thank you so much.
And as a small token to our beloved moderator over here, Ajit, you may want to please. Thank you, everyone. Again, thank you for attending this session. Please share your feedback on one of these two mechanisms. Our next session will start in the next couple of minutes, so would love to have you around in the same room. Thank you.